everyone, to our August Texas Book Chat Live. I'm Michele Santos with the Texas Center for the Book, and we are very honored today to have author Cynthia Levinson with us. Yay! A little bit about our guest. Cynthia is the winner of the Robert F. Seibert Medal and many other accolades. She has written numerous nonfiction books for young readers. A former teacher and educational policy consultant, Cynthia has written about history, law, policy, and social justice. Her newest book, Who Owns the Moon and Other Conundrums of Exploring and Using Space, grew out of her curiosity about the laws governing our activities in space. And please join me in welcoming Cynthia.
Thank you.
So how did Who Owns the Moon come about, and what inspired you to write it?
I was literally standing in my kitchen, staring at the refrigerator, and I thought, I wonder if there's any such thing as space law. So, I mean, that does sound like it came kind of like out of the blue or out of the void or something like that, but there is a reason for it. My husband and I wrote this book, Fault Lines in the Constitution. The third edition of it just came out last week. And so I was really thinking about law in general and constitutions and legal, governmental structures. So there was sort of a foundation for this thought that came to my mind. And I was standing in the kitchen, Sandy was in the living room working, and I said, is there such a thing as space law? And he said, I don't know. So that was a little over 4 years ago, and here it is. And the answer is yes, there is a lot.
So initially it seemed so miraculous that humans could go to the moon. And now we are viewing the moon as a launch pad for further space exploration. So can you share with us how the moon is now more important than ever and why?
Yeah, I would say even before we get to the point of using the moon as a launching pad, though that's certainly a part of it, I think there are a number of factors that are taking people back to the moon.
Okay.
And it's true, there are now rovers and robots and mechanical things that are going back to the moon, but there are plans by the United States, China, probably Japan, perhaps Russia, depending on their funding, maybe Israel, the European Space Agency, some consortiums of sending people back to the moon. But yes, the question is, why? Why are we going back there when we stopped and we've got an International Space Station that is doing a lot of research up there? Why go back to the moon? So there are a couple of reasons, even before we get to the launch pad. One is that since people stopped going to the moon, but since mechanical objects started roving around and pulling out samples from the moon, it's become clear that there is water ice on the moon. It's called water ice as opposed to just ice because it's not other substances that could be frozen, though that could well be true too. But it's the water ice is embedded in teeny tiny slivers of regolith, moon dust, moon dirt, that would have to be with great scientific engineering complexity extracted. But the advantage of it is that water being composed of hydrogen and oxygen, when people do go back to the moon, potentially they could use the oxygen to breathe.
Oh, the oxygen that's on the moon embedded there.
Yes, it's in the
that's
in the
fascinating.
water ice. Yeah, water being what it is.
Yeah.
So it would be a very multi-step process, but eventually it's certainly feasible. Plans are being made for people to breathe the oxygen that's not exactly on the moon, but could be taken from, sort of like disaggregated from the water ice. The other part of water is hydrogen, and that's where we get to the launching.
Okay.
hydrogen can be used as a fuel.
Okay.
So potentially, yes, the fuel could be used, the hydrogen could be used as fuel to get people off of the moon to Mars, or potentially to asteroids, maybe, or may get other objects, not human, enclosed objects, to asteroids because of what we call rare earth minerals that are on asteroids.
And so being able to extract it from the moon is less labor intensive than bringing it all in canisters from the Earth.
Yes, because getting the hardest part of sending something to space is getting away from Earth's atmosphere.
Okay.
Gravity is such a strong pull. There needs to be a huge amount of fuel, which is heavy at this point, to get us beyond 50 to 60 miles into be past, way past, but that's a major point of departure, um, away from Earth's atmosphere. The moon has a small amount of atmosphere, but not much. And so lifting off of the moon is
Much easier.
yeah, easier, less expensive.
Okay.
Yeah. Another reason to go back to the moon is that there are some rare, what we call rare earth. There could be rare moon minerals, but less rare on the moon, that are useful for technologies on Earth, like people's telephones.
Ah.
So those could be extracted potentially at less expense.
So we could mine the moon for these
Exactly.
things.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So, for audience members who have not yet read the book, Who Owns the Moon? And please tell us what the Outer Space Treaty is and what it does.
Right. Okay. So, spoiler alert, there is actually an answer. Who owns the moon? The answer is nobody. Nobody can own the moon. Yes, right. Yes, thank you. Yeah, right. Please, yeah. Even though, I mean, I was noticing, sorry, the historical exhibit that you have over there that I think Peggy Price is going to be talking about. And there's a facsimile of a medal and the die for the medal that, was it the governor gave to one of the Apollo astronauts? Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And that medal shows astronauts on the moon with a U.S. flag. And it's probably, that image is probably very well known, that the first astronauts who went to the moon stepped, you can see their boot prints on the moon in the regolith. There is an American flag there, or there was. It probably toppled over when they blasted off from the moon. But in any case, they did plant a flag. Prior to that, quite a bit prior to that, the USSR lobbed a metal sphere onto the moon. Just sort of went like this. It was just sort of an amazing arc. It went directly from Baikonur, the Russian space place, launching pad, to the moon, and it, by plan, broke apart on impact and scattered pennants, five-sided pennants, with the Russian insignia, the hammer and sickle, on it.
I didn't know that.
Yes, so there, and at that point, Khrushchev said, Americans sleep under a Russian moon.
Oh.
So all of this was very scary because this was, the first space race. We didn't want to be sleeping under a Russian moon. They didn't want to be sleeping under, an American flag on the moon. So as a result of all of that, there is an outer space treaty. And this came about, interestingly, because of President Johnson. I mean, here we are in Texas right now, the Texas State Library and Archives. And President Johnson got worried about a space race with Russia, got worried about who might own the moon or claim to, and he dispatched the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Arthur Goldberg, and got him to sit down with, I'm going to check here, I think it was Dobrynin, I'm reading here, um, to no, Fedorenko, the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, um, to come up with a treaty. This was in 1967, and they did it remarkably. 112 countries have
Okay.
ratified the Outer Space Treaty, and another 32 or so countries have signed it. Haven't quite ratified it yet, but they're on the way. Which out of 173, 163, 173 members
Yeah. That's
of the
amazing.
United Nations, that's great. That's
Yeah.
terrific. So, what is the Outer Space Treaty? It's really a statement of principles, it's statements of values. And the first one reads: the exploration and use of outer space shall be carried out for the benefit of all countries and shall be the province of all mankind. In the 60s they were talking about men, right?
Right.
We have
Right.
a bracket in the book of all human
Right.
kind.
Right.
And the second article of the Outer Space Treaty says outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies. Celestial bodies is a reference to anything not human made
Mhm.
that's out there, um, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means. So that means nobody owns the
Nobody
moon.
owns it.
Yeah.
But potentially we could be dealing with different companies who want to mine it at some point.
Yes. So that's a big part of this book, actually. Different countries, as I mentioned, there are a number of countries that are thinking of going to the moon. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying to make plans to, as well. You just mentioned, I think, companies.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, many companies also have independently have plans to send people to the moon and are already landing objects
Oh.
on the moon. So I talked a little bit about why people are going back to the moon, the water ice and the minerals. Most of what's valuable to collect on the moon is at the lunar South Pole,
Okay.
the South Pole of the moon, which is a surprisingly, given the size of the moon, it's a surprisingly limited area. It's about the size of Greater Houston.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Right.
Think the Grand Canyon, and there are canyons there
Okay.
also in that part of the moon. Not quite so deep as the Grand Canyon, and not so open, which makes it more complicated. They're narrow crevices to get into them, but it's not a big area.
Okay.
So you can imagine that having different countries, such as say us and China, trying to get there and set up mining operations with people and machinery and all of that, that could be um, an opportunity for conflict, which we hope it will not be. And there are some follow-on treaties to the Outer Space Treaty, and there are several accords which are very important, which China is not yet a part of, that we hope add more detail and meat to the Outer Space Treaty, to these sort of wonderful general principles that will be a way of countries and companies sharing space amicably.
Right. In a peaceful way.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating. So, how did you and your co author, Jennifer Swanson, conduct your research? What libraries did you use? I know there's like a NASA digital library and a NASA headquarters library. And
Yeah. So how do we do it? Well, um, we shared our specialty areas.
okay.
So as you said, I tend to write books about law, about history. I write about civil rights and social
Mm-hmm.
justice, and there is a component of that in this book as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Jen is a science writer for kids.
Okay.
So she mostly wrote the parts about the rockets and about engineering
Okay.
and that sort of thing. And I focused on the history and policy and space law parts of it. Um, So we went to different sources as a result of that. I did some of the science part, but we mostly had different sources because we were focusing on our specialty areas. So there actually are books of space law.
Okay.
And I read those. Some of them were just huge. I mean, you just think about, I don't know if you know anything about um, legal textbooks. They're just vast, so so I immersed myself in those. I talked to lots and lots of space lawyers, including people at NASA, space lawyers at NASA, um, and I read a lot of history. We both interviewed astronauts,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, did a lot of. We went to the Space Center
Yeah.
in Florida. I went to the Space Center, the what's it called? The something like the Udvar Hazy Space Archives, and it's like a giant warehouse of things that have gone to space and also aircraft.
Oh, in DC.
Yes, right,
Yeah.
just outside of DC. Yeah, and I've been to the Houston Space Center. I've gone to Starbase in South Texas.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, we
That's a
did
lot
bunch.
of research.
Lots of. There's a very big bibliography in the back of the book. Yeah.
So, what impressed you most about the space program and the people who work and continue to work in it? And you mentioned you had interviewed some astronauts. What was that like, or what was impressive to you about their story?
Um, One of the people that I interviewed was the first U.S. astronaut, American astronaut, on the International Space Station.
Oh, that's neat.
And his story, every chapter begins with a story. And based on that interview and other research that I did, the story about the first astronauts on the ISS opened that chapter on international relations.
Okay.
Because although he was Commander Shepard, although he was the first American, he went with two Russian cosmonauts.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was that nice friendship that they had made there.
Yeah,
I
so
remember that part.
that was very impressive because there was a space race and an arms race going on between the United States and the USSR at that point. And Commander Shepard, went over to Russia and trained there because he decided that he was going to be with two Russians,
Mhm.
and he knew that he was going to need to know how they operated.
Mm-hmm.
So, with some difficulty, he learned Russian
Okay.
and went there and trained. And that was just tremendously impressive to me. There's a photograph in the book. I don't know if I can find it right now. Of those three astronauts, they look like they're holding oranges up on the tip of their fingers. They're on the
Oh, that's fun.
on the space station, so they're weightless, but they've just managed to get oranges, on their fingertips. Getting that photograph was quite a story. Oh, have you found it? What? 54? Oh, thank you. Maybe I can quote it up. Would that be okay?
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
here it is. Yeah. So I don't want to make viewers dizzy, but if you see the book, it's on page 54. I probably had my fingers over the picture while I was doing this. Getting that photograph was quite an undertaking because, being here, as you probably know, photographs that are .gov
Yes.
are pretty much mostly in the public domain. So our editor got this photograph. We loved it. It just looked so fun. And there are, the two Russians and the American, and they're all getting along just fine, just great. And it's a NASA photograph. So we thought, great, we can use this photograph. Well, the book is about to go to print,
Mm-hmm.
like on a Friday, and like on Tuesday or Wednesday, we find out, no, we can't use this photograph because the Commander Shepard has retired. He's no longer an astronaut, so we have to get his permission. Okay,
Ah.
scramble, scramble. I get in touch with him. Sure, no problem. Okay, so we think we can use the picture. Well, but there are these Russians in there, and
Oh my
they're
goodness.
also retired, and you have to go get their permission too. So, so I'm sitting here in Austin
Yeah.
thinking, how am I going to get in touch with these Russian cosmonauts who are retired and they're over there? Well, the person who put me in touch with all three of them actually is a woman who lives in Houston who trained them.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I got in touch with Ginger Carrick.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, yeah, I'm in touch with Yuri and Sergei
Yes.
all the time. I'll just get in touch with them. All right. So she gets in touch with, I think it was Sergei. I mean, and the time is getting close, right? Yeah. So she gets in touch with Sergei, and Sergei says, sure, no problem. Thumbs up. You can use the photograph. Go back to the publisher. The publisher's lawyer says, there's still Yuri. I go to Ginger. Ginger goes to Sergei. Sergei says, I'm sure it's not a problem. No, no, no. You got to get an okay. All right. So Sergei says, no problem. I'm going to see Yuri tomorrow night. By now we're up to Friday, right? I'm going to go to a party Saturday. I'm going to see him.
In Russia.
Yeah, in Russia. Right. So on Sunday, I get back in touch with Ginger. Any news? She gets in touch with Sergei. Oops, I forgot.
Oh no!
Right.
They had too much vodka.
Here we are Monday. Finally, yes, we get this sort of written okay.
Yeah.
In Russian to go to. Ginger comes back to me and goes on. So the picture is here.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
thank you. Yes, right.
At least they're all still living, What would you do? So I enjoyed reading about how astronauts from many countries, like the example you just gave, have worked together on the International Space Station. Do you think Mars exploration will also be a collaborative effort? Why or why not?
Well, I think it will have to be.
Yeah.
It's very, very expensive.
Yeah.
We have a terrific background and history of multiple countries, over 20 astronauts, cosmonauts, taikonauts from over 20 countries have gone to the International Space Station. As far as we know, everybody is getting along very well. Each country that has built part of the ISS has its own area, and that is in effect sovereign territory, but they come together and work together and do research together and share everything. So yes, I have great faith that will happen. Now, I think it will be a long time. Now, Elon Musk has different plans or different aspirations. My sources suggest it will be a long time before there are actually people on Mars.
Okay.
And people actually, kind of, living stationed on Mars will be likely much, 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 much farther out.
Yeah.
I've heard even as much as thousands of years before there's
Wow.
colonies of people situated on Mars. Even at this point, when we talk about people going to the moon, we're talking about people landing on the moon, as we did, and spending some time there, but not for some time yet actually living on the moon. The idea is, the Artemis project, the idea is to have a habitat.
Okay.
Orbiting moon and people going back and forth, mostly sleeping on that, not on the moon. But I do foresee a time in not too far from now, in the next decade perhaps at most, with people spending longer periods of time on the moon. But it's very challenging. It's a very unfriendly environment for which human beings have not evolved.
Right. Well, and also what you were saying with the Russians and the American working together, you really have to trust those people with your life. I mean, everything you're doing could be
Yes.
the last thing you do, right? So, So what was the most challenging part of working on this book, and what was the most rewarding part?
I love that question because those are in tandem.
Okay.
What was most challenging was also the most rewarding. Um, so even though I've written a book about the U.S. Constitution, I did that with my husband, and he's a constitutional scholar, and so he was always. We share a library space in our house here, and I could just literally sort of call over this bookshelf that we have. Hey, Sandy, what about, so I could get my answer right away. But
Yeah.
that's U.S. law, Constitution, U.S. Constitution stuff. I knew nothing about space law when I began this book. And one thing, of course, leads to another. So it was really challenging for me to understand the law and the things that it related to, such as liability.
Okay. Because you're
Um,
not an attorney.
no, I'm
Okay,
not.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, and I don't have legal training. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so understanding the law and understanding the importance of nuances in language in the law
Yeah.
really matters. Um, so liability, for instance, what if you just mention what if what you do, out in space is the last thing you do, or what
Right.
if you do something you do out in space is dangerous, which it's going to be, and somebody gets hurt, or
Right.
there's a whole chapter here on space debris.
Yes.
And not very long ago, a pipe, probably from the International Space Station, landed, crashed through a roof and 2 floors of a house.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and we write about this here in the book, in Florida.
Oh my gosh.
So who's liable for that,
Right.
for instance? So I had to learn about that. And my co-author Jen said, "Well, okay, so people from different countries, they have different laws. Who's accountable?" Well, I had to go find out about the International Court of Justice and when it applies and when it doesn't apply, and what its purview is. So all of that was tremendously challenging. I depended a lot on the space lawyers that I talked with, also on some of Sandy's colleagues here at the
Oh,
UT
okay.
Law School,
Okay.
who were very kind. Um, I I mentioned that I did do some of the science part of the book. So um, the International Telecommunications Union,
Uh-huh.
this is relevant because there are questions about really how will people get along on the moon. There are precedents. For instance, the law of the sea, the International Law of the Sea,
Okay.
and Antarctica. Those are places.
That are communal kind of.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. So I had to learn about those. But there's something else that's relevant here, and that is radio signals.
Okay.
Like water ice on the moon, which is a natural resource but limited, radio signals are also they're out there.
Oh, okay.
And there is a way, the ITU, that countries share radio signals.
Oh, I did not
So
know
I had
that.
to go talk to a physicist and find out, how does this work? How do we do it?
Yeah.
What are radio signals? Where do they come from? And how does KUT or some
Right.
other radio station actually get its bandwidth? Well, there was all of that, but I learned so much
Yeah.
doing all of this and talking to people and meeting people and having conversations like this. Hugely rewarding.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So we have several school librarians in the audience, and I know this book was written for middle school and up. So why did you choose that age group as your audience versus writing for an adults or even for younger kids? Like, what's special about that age group for you?
I don't know how to write for adults. I think maybe I stopped my maturational level like in maybe eighth grade, and that's kind of the voices in my
Okay.
head. I actually find it I find it harder to write younger. I
Okay.
find it harder to write short.
Okay.
Um, so this seemed like the right age group, also because so my co-author Jen has written a number of picture books about space and about science
Uh-huh.
for younger kids, but to incorporate the law part of it, I knew that was going to be complicated. The
Okay.
concepts are just hard. And simply the idea, the title, as you said, is Who Owns the Moon and Other Conundrums of Exploring and Using Space. So, conundrums is a really important idea with this book. It's something that's not been solved yet, or something that's very complicated
Okay.
and could be sort of oppositional. So it needed an older than little kid audience to get at that.
And I think you did a great job when I read it as a adult who is not a scientist. I appreciated that it was sort of simplified to the level that a 13-year-old could read it, made it
Good.
more digestible for me as an adult even, and also more like if somebody gave me a book on international space law, like that was
Yeah.
a huge, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's not happening, but no, I found it really compelling.
Good. Thank you.
So, what do you think the future holds for the United States when it comes to exploring space? Like, do you think we'll land on Mars in the next 50 years? I know you were talking about many, many years
Yeah.
out there before we have
Right.
a colony or something.
Right. So one of the things we talk about in the book is part of the book is in terms of the United States, how important a presidential administration is in terms of the goals of NASA. So it was initially President Kennedy
Mm-hmm.
who said, we're going to land people on the moon in this decade. That was in 1961. And then he gave this, which I just learned, I thought it was a little bit later. And then he gave this speech at Rice, in which he talked about, we're going to put people on the moon in this decade. And it happened in 1969. And it was President Johnson who um, inspired the Outer Space Treaty. It was President Eisenhower who got NASA going. He said, we need this, a space administration. So presidents are really important to allocation of funding and goals for space. The International Space Station is slated to deorbit in 2030,
Oh, okay.
which isn't very long from
No,
now.
it's not very
So,
long. No.
yeah, so the last I heard, there are still plans for NASA to find a company to some extent take apart the ISS is huge. There's a couple of football fields out in length out there, and
Yeah.
there are as I said, multiple countries and companies that have pieces of it. So all of that has to be worked out. But the question of how to deorbit it and basically land chunks of it in the ocean,
Oh, wow.
in the right way, so nobody on Earth is
It's
trouble.
hard.
A lot of fish,
Yeah.
maybe, but
Yeah.
yeah. As far as I know, that is still on track to happen in 2030. Mars, I don't know. I mean, do I think we will land on Mars? I mean, we already have rovers
Right.
on Mars. They're just
Right.
sending back phenomenal
Images.
pictures,
Yeah.
images,
Yeah.
yes, exactly, and information. Whether there will be other machines or people at some point, I don't think I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to add before we do Q&A with the audience?
I mentioned that, thank you for asking. I mentioned that many of my books have to do with social justice. And that's not often talked about in terms of space, but it is a real issue in a couple of ways. One has to do with debris, which
Yes.
I mentioned. We are running out of space in space, which sounds a little crazy. It's vast, right? But most objects, most person-made, human-made objects are in low Earth orbit, and they're objects that are defunct like satellites, or things that go astray like wrenches, which has happened,
Oh, okay.
something goes off and, from an extravehicular walk from the ISS, and there it goes, and it crashes into other things, and there's a lot of debris. And so it's becoming more and more difficult to get to space and to avoid those things.
Okay.
And it's countries that can see them, can track those, that are going to have the best opportunity to still get to space. SpaceX, Starlink, has by far, by magnitudes more satellites in space than any other company and any other country
Okay.
does. So Starlink can make decisions about who has access to what satellite opportunities.
Which doesn't seem like that should be the power held by a single company.
Well, it has happened.
Yeah.
There have been threats.
Okay.
So that's an issue.
Yeah.
And I would like to read just a statement that came from a member of the United Nations in 1967 with the negotiations over the Outer Space Treaty. Liberia's then president, William V.S. Tubman, said, quote, "No matter how small, no matter how struggling, no matter how poor we may be, we share the same heavens with the greatest powers." So we all need to remember that we do share this space of space, and we want to make it accessible and peaceful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So does anyone have any questions?
Does the extraction of resources from the moon harm the integrity of the moon? And are there any laws in place, kind of like we have like certain protected areas here on Earth and in the United States, like do those extend into space?
So just in case people watching the video couldn't hear the question.
Do you want to repeat the question? Here, hang on.
Yeah, so great. It's better for you to say it again than for me to try to recapitulate it.
So since you mentioned that there are plans to extract resources from the moon, will that harm the integrity of the moon itself? And similar to how we have certain protected areas on Earth, like in the United States specifically, will there be protected areas that extend to space to make sure that we're not messing up like the moon or other places?
Yeah, those are both great questions. I think we don't know if there might be harm to the moon itself if a person, or more likely a robot, goes down into one of these crevices in the moon and starts extracting. I mean, it could be like fracking here. We just didn't know until things started happening what the repercussions might be. Related to that, there is a space lawyer at the University of Mississippi, Michele, who she started a nonprofit called For All Moonkind.
Oh, wow.
And she wants to preserve historic places on the moon. So like where the Apollo 11 astronauts, landed, those boot prints and whatever may be left of the US flag, that sort of thing. She wants to be sure that these are recognized as remarkable historical places. So that kind of relates to the first part of your question. Secondly, yeah, so I mentioned that there are accords, they're called Artemis Accords, to establish protected areas to work on. So that when people or machinery goes and do things, that yes, there will be sort of a perimeter, and there will be agreements between countries, ideally also between companies, but companies are not a part of the Artemis Accords. There are some private corporations that are developing their own agreements, but those are really voluntary, as the Artemis Accords are. And the Artemis Accords between or among countries say, we will say in advance, here's the amount of explosives that we're going to use at this time for this period of time in this area, and we will build a fence around it and protect our equipment and be sure that your equipment is not bothered. And then once our time period is up, we will go away and then somebody else can come in. So yes, these accords have been signed now by almost 50 countries, but not by Russia, not by China at this point. There's a chapter in the book called Who's in Charge Around Here? In which I made up a couple of astronauts from two fictional countries and an announcer, and they get into greater and greater levels of discord on the moon. And when I do school visits, I have kids wear, a helmet for the astronauts, and the announcer, he gets to wear, the dealy boppers. To talk about exactly those sorts of issues. So great questions. Thank you.
Any other question? Oh,
You mentioned, sorry, you mentioned the level of complexity of the concepts that are being conveyed in your book, and I'm wondering if you have ever considered having a graphic adaptation so that some of those complex ideas are conveyed through images as part of the narrative. Is that maybe even another point of access for readers?
I love that idea, and I also love your skirt. People can't see, but there are like asteroids in space right on your skirt. Thank you for doing that. So, a graphic adaptation, that would be wonderful. Here's how that actually works in real kidlit publishing life. So, the second edition of this book here, Fault Lines in the Constitution, also exists as a graphic novel.
oh,
It's
cool.
super. Different publisher. So this book is by Peachtree Publishers. Macmillan loved this book and got permission from us, my husband and me, and from Peachtree. Permission took a long time to turn that into a graphic novel. They only marketed it to adults,
Oh, that's interesting.
which kind of drove me crazy. And so, I mean, schools fortunately bought it and used it, but that was kind of by happenstance. So if this were to become a graphic novel, that would be great. But Peachtree actually doesn't have a history or experience. We actually asked Peachtree if they would consider doing a graphic novel of the third edition of Fault Lines in the Constitution, but they came back and said that's just kind of not in our bailiwick. So if you could talk Macmillan or somebody else into it, thank you.
Hi, I've been flipping through as you were speaking as well, just to kind of get an idea of what I was looking at. And the situation with China is just very interesting, in my opinion, especially since the law that was passed, or the amendment that was passed, only in 2011. Okay, I was thinking it was much further back. But
The Wolf Amendment?
Yes, do you see the Wolf Amendment being removed anytime soon?
So, probably not, but who knows? So the Wolf Amendment It was an amendment that a senator attached to the appropriations bill from Congress. And it says basically that the United States and China cannot cooperate in space.
Oh.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, and nor can companies, American companies, cooperate with Chinese government or Chinese, companies to the extent that they exist independently on space either without the permission of, I think it's the FBI.
Oh, good
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah. Uh, what he was concerned about were two things. One was China taking U.S. intellectual property. That was the biggest thing. But also, he didn't like the possibility of China being bad actors in other ways.
Yeah.
And that amendment has been attached to every appropriations bill since then, every single one.
Oh my gosh.
There, a couple of times, there actually has been cooperation between the two countries, but the FBI and whichever other federal agency had to prove that intellectual property wasn't at stake and China was not going to take advantage of it in any other ways as
Oh
a
my
bad
goodness.
actor in the world.
That's
So it really is complicating things. People would like it to go away. A lot of people would like that to go away. It really, really interferes with international cooperation. But yeah, I don't know.
Such an interesting portion.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to let you know as a treat for us, Peggy Price from Eris from Archives Division has some really wonderful items from our collection, including a Texas flag that was on spacecraft and some other really neat items over there, and she'll be available to talk about that. And last but not least, the Capitol Visitor Center bookshop next door has signed copies of Who Owns the Moon. Cynthia signed those right before we did this talk, and that's just right out there. And if anyone has a copy with them, I'm sure she'd be happy to sign it. But yeah, please, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
That was
you
really
to
fun.
everybody here.
Yeah,
So
that was
much.
wonderful. That was great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.